Hi, I'm Woody Mann. Welcome to Advanced Jazz and Latin Improvisation with Emily Remler, a classic hot licks lesson first released in VHS format in 1986. For this DVD reissue, we've added many special features designed to help you get the most out of this one-hour presentation. Remler had an impressive, if sadly brief, career, releasing several critically acclaimed albums and playing alongside legends including Astro Gilberto and Larry Coryell before her untimely death at age 32 in 1990. Check out the artist bio and discography sections of this DVD for a fuller appreciation of Remler's accomplishments. Remler's esteemed reputation was gained in part for her proficiency and tastefulness in Brazilian music. During this presentation, she explains, as well as demonstrates, the proper rhythms for playing bossa nova and samba. You'll learn the alternating bass note patterns and syncopated chord work necessary for comping, and receive a solid foundation for melodic improvisation in these ever-popular styles. In particular, her ingenious approach to soloing over dominant seventh chords is especially insightful. Chord diagrams, standard notation, and tablature all appear on screen for the musical examples, and a transcription booklet with additional lesson material is also included in the package. The DVD's special features also help you break down the lessons even more. For instance, a slow motion option lets you play any of the examples at half speed while the audio remains at standard pitch. There's also a looping capability. This allows you to pinpoint any example and replay it as often as you wish, either at regular or half speed. Remler credits guitarists who've influenced her, including Wes Montgomery and Jim Hall, so you can trace how her style developed. A suggested listening section provides information on these and other artists you'll want to check out. In addition to the instructional material, you'll also get to enjoy some of Remler's solo performances while she was in her musical prime. This production captures her passionate playing and teaching, keeping alive the legacy of one of the most important guitarists. We know you'll be inspired by studying advanced jazz and Latin improvisation with Emily Remler.
Hi. Welcome to Hot Licks Tape, Latin and Jazz Improvisation Advanced. My name is Emily Remler. I'll be talking about my way of playing bossa nova, which I believe is a traditional Brazilian method taught to me by a woman named Cecilia at Berklee College of Music who taught Pat Metheny. She taught us both what we believe to be the traditional way of playing bossa nova. And ever since I learned from that woman, I've been pretty successful with it because I got a job with Astrid Gilberto for 4 years. And I also imitated the way João Gilberto and the other Brazilians played the bossa nova rhythm. And it can be one of the most fantastic rhythms if you can really get it down. A lot of Americans are pretty much doing it in a halfway method. They're syncopating the bass too much. The traditional way to do this, and for some people it takes a week, for some people it takes months, and some people never get it. But I have confidence that the people who buy this tape and who work with it will get it. The bass is unmovable. The bass is on 1 and 3 of the accents of the beats. No syncopation with the bass. The chords are the syncopated things in this situation. It's a 2-bar pattern, and the bass is on 1 and 3. So if we were to put our metronome on so we can make sure we're right on time, as a sequel to my first tape showing you how to use the metronome on 2 and 4, we're going to use the metronome now on 1 and 3 because that's the accent on the Latin beat is very straight. And I'm going to put the metronome on. Around 104. Okay, the first thing we do is to find a comfortable chord. I'm doing a D minor chord, which is on the 5th fret. You can see me doing it. Second finger is on the root, and the rest is, it's just like a D9, but the 3rd is moved down, so it's 2 frets below. 5th fret. I've got a D minor chord, and I'm going to use an alternating bass line. Now, this is a 5th string root chord. So on the 6th string root chords, we won't be able to alternate our bass line. We just remain on the same bass note. But we will use the alternating bass line here. Let me show you how this just goes on 1 and 3. This is just the bass now. One, two, three, four. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. Just like a polka, straight. Don't do any of this, that stuff. It's not salsa, it's bossa nova. It's very straight. Now I'm going to put some chords in. Okay, what we're doing there is just a 2-5 progression in the key of C, meaning the chord built on the 2nd degree of the scale, D minor 7, adding a 9, which in a D minor 7 would be an E, adding the E. We've got D, F, C, and E. A is eliminated. The 5th is one of the least needed notes of the chord. And it's just a bossa nova sounding chord, this minor 9 chord. It's a good chord to start learning the bossa nova with. And the G7-13, you're just moving your other 3 fingers down. Your pinky remains constant on the 5th fret. Let's just try that, just those 2 chords. Just switching. Don't worry about the rhythm yet. Okay, now we're going to go back to the original thing, which is the bass line, the alternating bass line. Now, you realize you're doing two things at once. You're acting as if you're a percussionist. Basically, we're doing 3 against 4 and things like that. We touch bass with our first beat. We pick the chord and the bass note at the same time, and then it's sort of like that. We don't hit the earth until the last beat. The rest of the chords are all tied and they're syncopated until the last beat of this 2-bar phrase when they all come together. You'll be able to hear this as I go by. First, join with me. We'll just do the alternating bass line on 1 and 3. I'll count. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. Now, as we get more comfortable, we're going to add the chords in. Just imitate me and just keep doing it until you can do it right along with me. Memorize the rhythm. Okay, so the chords by themselves form a rhythm like this. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. They're very much syncopated. That's why I'm slapping the strings, so I can get my own bearings. If you'll notice, my foot is tapping. My foot will always be on 4. And you'll notice how the chords will be on all the upbeats. This is a very syncopated rhythm here. And that's what the Brazilians do. The bass is always on 1 and 3. The bass gives your plateau so that you can be so syncopated. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's the way you should work on it. With the metronome, working with the bass on 1 and 3, make sure you don't put the chords in, the highly syncopated chords, which will be shown on the screen. Make sure you don't put the chords in until you've got that bass moving through your stomach. I mean, you really have to feel that bass and get it through your mind that it's unmovable. It looks a lot easier than it is. I've had students take almost as much as 2 to 3 months to get this down. And then, of course, to get the actual folk Brazilian feeling and the happy-go-lucky feeling that they have, hopefully, for an American, I'm doing it pretty good. Now, when I'm switching chords, I'm also switching to the root of the chord, and then I'm also switching to approach notes, chromatic approach notes above or below the target chord. So in the key of C, D minor 7, which we just said before is the 2 chord, G7 13 to C major 7, but I'm stopping off at a D flat approach note. Again, right along with me. Keep going. Now I'd like to talk about how to play on these progressions. I've developed a system of playing over 2 5s that's sort of a combination of Berklee College of Music method and just sort of things I've discovered on my own. There's a lot of talk about modal playing. I don't see modes as anything but a major scale starting from a different degree. I don't make a big deal out of the modes. I personally cannot think Mixolydian flat 7, a flat 5, flat sharp 11, flat 13. I can't think all those things. So I preferred to take some time out and for a few months did this certain method, which was to think of dominant 7th chords in a different way. I never think of Mixolydian. That is not part of my vocabulary of playing jazz and bossa nova. When I see dominant chords, I play minor scales, and I'll tell you which ones in a moment. We'll talk about how I got to that point. I never had any trouble playing over the major chords. Major chords I could really burn at, you know, even before I could really play. C major. You know, it was very easy for me to hear C major. C minor was very easy for me to hear. But what I could not hear was this. You know, that sweet Georgia Brown stuff, the bridge of all those bebop tunes. I couldn't hear that. That wasn't in my blood. And I went to New Orleans and I studied with some Dixieland people, and I tried doing the chord shapes, and that didn't work. When I wanted to go D minor, G7 to C, I didn't want to just play in the key of C. I wanted to sound like the way Joe Pass and Pat Martino sounded, which was tension release, dark to light. And I figured out a way of doing this with just one scale. So basically, I'm playing jazz with 2 scales, minor and major. For the major chords, I play major scales. Okay, for the minor chords, I play minor scales. And for the dominant chords, I play minor scales also. Now let's get to that point. There are 2 different types of dominant chords in the world. Type 1 is the type that does not resolve down a fifth. That's simply, it just doesn't resolve down a fifth. For instance, in Girl from Ipanema, the 2 chord. It doesn't resolve from G7 to C. It goes someplace else. For instance, that, or Killer Joe. All the dominants that don't resolve down a fifth, that's simply, they belong to this category. You've heard this sound. All those dominants belong to type 1 category. This is the Emily Remler method of how to play on dominant 7th chord. I had to make this up because I couldn't hear this by ear. This was the one thing I really had to think about until I could hear it. Now I can hear it and I don't have to think. Okay, so let's think now. Let's do some intellectualizing so we can expand our ears and then we don't have to think anymore and we can just play. As Miles says, learn it and then forget it and act like you never learned it. Well, that's what I heard he said anyway. Type 1 dominant 7th, the dominant 7th that doesn't resolve. Well, let's take the G7 that's headed for, let's say, F7. Just as long as it's not going home 5 to 1, it belongs to the type 1 category. I personally think D jazz minor. I think the jazz minor up a fifth. Jazz minor is nothing but the melodic minor scale. We have to call it jazz minor because classically, the melodic minor scale ascends different than it descends. The jazz minor scale, I think maybe Berkeley made that phrase up, and it's a fine term. It simply is a major scale with a flatted third, or a minor scale with a natural 6 and 7. I prefer to think of it that way. D jazz minor would consist of this position. Here's another one. Now, unfortunately, I wish I could play this at the same time. Please try to hear this chord and sustain this chord in your mind, and I'll play the scale for you. All right, that gives you that beautiful sound. Now, the reason why this works is because all the notes of a D jazz minor scale coincide perfectly with the G7 chord. Let's take a G7 13 chord. First of all, the type 1 dominant 7ths that don't resolve down a fifth, you're going to play natural tensions, meaning natural color tones, 9s, sharp 11, and 13s. They just sound that way. You would never play Take the A Train like this. Da 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 da. You play da 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 da. Sweet. It's got to be natural because you're going out of the key. Those are the dominant 7ths that don't resolve, require natural tensions, 9, sharp 11, and 13. Okay. Back to our G7 13. Let's take the D jazz minor scale. Let's take the notes of a D jazz minor scale. D, E, F, G, A, B, C sharp, D. Okay. Let's relate that to our G7 13 chord. Why does it work over the G7 13 chord? The D is the 5th of the chord. The E is the 13 of the chord. The F is the 7th of the chord. You following me? The G is the root of the chord. The A is the 9th of the chord, which is an acceptable color tone. The B is the 3rd of the chord, which is certainly the most valuable chord tone of the G7 chord. The C sharp is the sharp 11, which gives us that nice spice real pretty sound, Lydian sound. And then again, the D is again in the fifth. So you're getting all the important chord tones of a G7 chord, plus all the available color tones and the pretty tensions above that. And then also you're starting on the fifth of the chord, so you're not getting that white bread sound of starting on the root. You see, I could not take that that sound of G mixolydian. When they taught me G713, think this. I couldn't take that. That sounded very dull to me. This sounds better to me. And I noticed Wes Montgomery also did it. Here we are, G7. All those type of chords. Let's say I'm going up a half step. For a G713, I'm playing D jazz minor, and I really want to stress arpeggios. Arpeggios are a big deal because with jazz tunes, you're moving so fast. Some of your chords and some of your keys are going by so fast, especially things like giant steps and all the other things that people are trying to conquer. You have no room to do anything but an arpeggio. An arpeggio describes the chord the best. So let's say we do our D jazz minor arpeggio over our G713 chord. That's where I get that sound. So actually, when I'm playing a blues, when I see B flat 713, I'm actually thinking F jazz minor. Going to B flat jazz minor. Going to those are all type 1 dominants that do not resolve home. They're going other places. That includes every dominant that doesn't resolve from 5 to 1. You play the jazz minor scale up a fifth. And if you can just do that much thinking, and especially the arpeggio, you won't believe how your ears will expand. It just did unbelievable things to my playing. And this was one of the few things that I really did some thinking about. Everything else was a lot by ear. And as I spoke before, my first tape, I learned to play by putting on the metronome, laying down chord patterns, and playing over them. Writing songs, putting the chord changes down, having 10-minute rhythm tapes and playing over them, stopping it when I couldn't do a lick and doing the lick 15 times until I could get it, being very disciplined and being joyous about the thing. I loved to do the thing, and I couldn't wait to get home to do it, you know, and play along with different Wes Montgomery records. And mainly get every style down, as we were talking about Latin before, to get the Latin sound really down like the Latin guys are playing it. You know, to give it your best, to give it your all, you know, as much as authentic as possible. When I was playing Dixieland, I tried to be authentic with that. Unfortunately, I grew up in New Jersey and country music wasn't in my blood. I really can't give that my all. I still have problems playing country music, you know, in a serious manner, but I did see Coal Miner's Daughter, and I liked that, but anyway, getting back to this. So, whenever a dominant 7th chord is not resolving down to its 5th, not resolving down to its 1, whenever it's not going 5 to 1, play the jazz minor up a 5th, okay? So for instance, B flat jazz minor, B flat 713. You're going to play what jazz minor? F. That's where Wes gets that heaven sound. Remember that? Okay, and that's also McCoy Tyner does that also. And Pat Martino does that also. So I'm taking the trouble to actually think up a fifth. And now I don't even have to think anymore. I think for about 3 months I did have to think. In other words, I'd see the chord on the piece of paper. I'd see an A flat 7 chord. And it was going someplace besides to D flat major, which would be its home base. The A flat 7 chord lasted 8 bars. I'd have to think E flat minor, E flat minor, E flat minor. And I don't think any more scales. I think I have my own melodies in E flat minor. When I think E flat minor, I don't think this anymore. My E flat minor goes like this. That's my E flat minor. And it's to be played over this chord. Well, I'm behind, right? Okay, that takes care of the type 1. So that is foolproof. That will always work for you. For instance, now when you play Take the A Train, your first chord's C major. You're going to play a C major scale on that. Your second chord is D7. And it's not resolving down to G major, is it? So what jazz minor scale are we going to play? A jazz minor. For God's sake, it's shaped around the same chord. Da, 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 da. Look at this. That's where they get that sound. Da, da, dun, da, da, da. That's the sound, okay? Now, the wonderful thing about this is that for the type 2 dominant 7th chord, you also play a jazz minor scale. So you only have to learn 2 positions of the jazz minor scale. A 6-string root position, and a 5th-string root position. And you can cover both type of dominant chords, because now I'm going to get to type 2, which is the dominant 7th chords that do resolve 5 to 1. Okay, these are going home. I'll talk in the key of C because it's very easy for me to think of C, you know. We're going G7 to C. We're going G7 to C minor, G7 to C major 7. We're going home. Okay, in that case, we can put all sorts of altered tensions on it because we're going to release because we're going home, right? G7 13, flat 13. Okay. Now, when I'm going 5 to 1, I think the jazz minor scale, again, up a half step this time. So if I have a G7 flat 13 chord, I think A flat jazz minor. Do you hear it? Dark to light. It eliminates the problem of sounding like white bread. D minor, G7 to C is not all C major. For the D minor, you play the D Dorian, D minor 7, D F A C. And as I said, I'm very much into arpeggios because you don't have time to do anything else. And that's the best way to describe that chord. D minor 7. See the shape of the A minor chord I'm doing? A flat minor? A flat minor, I'm very sorry. Okay, now, so an exercise for everybody to do now will be a series of 2 5s. Okay, now you have to develop, I've got my own melodies, licks, whatever you want to call them, to fall back on for all these things. That was hot. Okay, let's say we're going 2 5 1 6, which is a common vamp. You heard the sound. Okay, we've already got the D minor, we play D Dorian, D F A C. The G7, we're going to play A flat minor. We're going to play C major here. Now you tell me, what do we play on the A7? What type of dominant 7 chord is that A7 chord? The A7 is headed towards a D minor 7 chord. So is it type 1 or type 2? It's going down 5 to 1. It is resolving. Therefore, it's type 2. So we play the jazz minor scale up a half step. Okay? D minor 7. A flat jazz minor. C major 7. C. B flat minor. Okay, I'm playing over 1 6 2 5s. I've got specific melodies that I'm doing. Now I know there's a lot of scales to think of. What you have to do now is write out about 10 of your own special, private melodies, licks, whatever you want to call them, to fall back on when you're not improvising. As I said before in my earlier tape, I don't believe anyone improvises 100% of the time. It's impossible. I think Wes probably improvised 30% of the time, and John Coltrane, the rest of us are doing a lot of things by rote, what we've done before, what we've heard before. There's a lot of things you need to fall back on to fill in space. And I also want to suggest that when you do these exercises of writing out 2, 5, 1s using these jazz minor scales, to do mostly eighth notes, to play straight eighth notes. If you can play straight eighth notes, you can do anything. For instance, I've had students come to me with let's say, a tune called Blue Bossa or something, and I've given them the instruction to play straight eighth notes through the whole tune. Okay. Now, they'll get concerned that they'll sound too much like a machine gun, like a robot or something like that. This will never happen. What will happen is that your flow will be constant. If you can play straight eighth notes through a whole tune, your flow will be so constant that at any point you can stop. Because live, when you're playing live, you will not play straight eighth notes. But your flow, your timing flow will be so smooth that you can stop it at any point and start again, instead of approaching it from a jutting set of licks and you going from one frantic set to another frantic set, or one frantic motif to another frantic motif. Try to play straight eighth notes over everything with the metronome, and even better than that, try to play straight 16th notes. That would be incredible. Now, there's a tune called Blue Bossa. I'm going to play straight eighth notes all the way through this. Okay, this is going to be hard. I'm going to do this. I just figured out that I'm going to do this. All right. So give me some time here. Let me put the metronome on because I have to make sure I'm right. Okay, here we are. 1. I'm going to give myself an intro. 1, 2. This is also samba comping. I wanted to get into this too, so we might as well do this at the same time. I got this from Jim Hall. Totally take it from Jim Hall. I'm going to comp now. I want you to play straight F notes. See how difficult it is to play straight eighth notes. That's the thing to do. You have to fill up your time, you have to fill up your space with good notes. You can see I had a hard time doing it. It's very hard to do it with no chords behind you. What I'm asking you guys to do is copy my samba rhythm, which seems to be a pretty acceptable samba rhythm to the Brazilians that I played with. I'll go over it again. It's very simple. It's almost like funk. You know, don't mess with that. You know, it makes things too agitated. 2 and 4. I'm sorry, 1 and 3. Okay, so make a rhythm tape for yourself. This is the advice I give you because this is how I learned. And play all straight eighth notes over that. Now for the C minor, you're going to play C Dorian. For the F minor, you're going to play F Dorian. Minor chords, just the minor notes. Now, but when you get to the G7, at the end of the tune, when you get to the G7, what are we going to play? That G7 is resolving down to C minor. Therefore, it's type 2 of dominant 7th chord. I'm trying to get you to, I wish I could show you this list. I'm sure this list will be up here. And it is a lifelong list, and it's foolproof. It really is. It really works good. The G7, the flat 13, the G7 sharp 9, the G7 flat 9, the chords in all blues that confused you, the D7 sharp 9, the E flat 7 sharp 9, all those altered chords that you don't know how to play over. Think jazz minor up a half step, okay? And all the other dominant 7ths that don't resolve down a 5th, think jazz minor up a 5th. Basically, you're turning everything into a 2-5. When your dominance when you have your dominant 7th chord, you're turning it into a 2-5. When you have your minor chord, you're turning it into a 2-5 also. There's so many 2-5s in jazz, that's what we're doing. We're turning everything into 2-5s. And that's where you get the best results. For instance, when I was comping on Blue Bossa like this, I was turning it into a 2-5. Notice the pattern of C minor going to F7. Again with the guide tones. I just want to close up with some of my real true feelings about music that surpass chords and notes and technique and electronics and the instrument itself into what the thing is really about. And I've given many seminars at a lot of colleges, and I see young people, I'm still a young person, very, very much concerned with equipment and with playing fast and with imitating others and coming up to certain standards, where the thing really is to try to be an individual and to try to express your own emotions. Now, 52nd Street doesn't exist, which means, in my language, that there aren't that many places to go and jam, where Charlie Parker used to jam, and you could sit in with Dizzy Gillespie and Miles Davis and all that. You can't do that anymore. We've got to listen to the records to keep the legend going. Take what you can get from them, but put your own feeling into it. Put your own voice into it. You have a right to be on this earth. You have a right to express your spirit. And everyone has to find their own spirit. When you transcribe someone else's work, try as much as possible to put it into a vocabulary of your own words, of your own feelings. Start right now, if you haven't done before, expressing feelings. When I was at Berkeley, my first 6 months, I couldn't play in front of my teacher because playing for me was so personal. I was too embarrassed. It always was like that with me. It's an outlet for expressing feelings, and it's actually a form of therapy. And we're actually blessed that we have this outlet that the normal folk who work 9 to 5 do not have, that we can actually express our feelings on this instrument, that I can talk about joy, and certain chords can fill me full of sadness and sentiment, and that I can understand musicians without even meeting them. I know them, and I hope maybe you know me better now by my music. There was a time when I thought that I was just being a sham because I was copying Pat Martino and Wes Montgomery and things like that. But now they're telling me I have my own voice. I'm trying to get my own voice and be my own independent person now that I'm getting older in years and experiencing life. Don't be afraid to experience life and leave your guitar alone for a couple of minutes. It's not always about the guitar. It's about you giving, taking, learning, sharing, being an accompanist. Being an accompanist means getting your ego out of the way. The sooner you can get your ego out of the way, the better you'll be a great musician. And that's what I've learned from the great musicians. I'm going to play, as a closing piece, my interpretation of Afro Blue, written by Mongo Santa Maria, and John Coltrane recorded it. But I've changed it pretty much. This is my interpretation. 1.